Hello, everyone, and welcome to vBrownBag. The weekly IT video that we try to bring every week. Not possible, but the first of the year. Basically, we bring experts from the wide world of technology to talk about. Doesn't matter if it's AWS, Python, Azure, whatever topic you prefer. It's kind of like a show and tell for tech geeks who basically want to learn something new. So tonight we are going to have a presentation about diving deep on CICD, and in this case we are going to have Johannes Koch with us. Continue with this. We'll be basically work with him today. So Johannes Koch, as you can see there, it has their Twitter handle Lockhead, which is in fact your surname. You can follow me at Dan Gaiden. You can follow him at Lockhead. But if you want to just get in touch with us within this session, you can follow the hashtag vBrownBag. We try to do these shows on EMEA every Tuesday. As I said, nothing that I was able to do for a couple of months, but always on Tuesday, 7 p.m. British summertime, which is 8 p.m. UTC +2 right now, because we are in May. You can also use our @vBrownBag for all the accounts that we have. And I think without further ado, I will just pass everything to Johannes, which should bring us a lot of goodies about CICD stuff with AWS, Code Catalyst, and the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. And I hope that we're going to make this as entertaining as possible for anyone watching. So I will count on you on challenging me on some of the stuff that I'm going to present. And at the end, I hope that everyone listening learns something and grows a little bit as part of this session.
Absolutely.
If you do, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Dan.
No, absolutely. I mean,
if you do learn something, let us know what you learned. And if you do not learn something, then tell us why you didn't. So maybe we can do this a little bit better next time. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is a topic that is very close to what I do on a regular basis. It's about getting software engineers and software teams thinking about why CI/CD is the first thing that you do in a new software project or in any software project that you actually work with. Before going into details on the topic, I'm going to add some more details around who I am. So who are you listening to today? I am Johannes Koch. Lockhead is actually my nickname, which I've been using since I was like 16. And yeah, I love building things with using any kind of technologies, using Java, TypeScript, or also Angular, Python. Lately, I've been doing a lot of stuff with Flutter as well. And that is obviously, since a few years, everything that I want to do and that I'm working on is on AWS. I really think that doing CI/CD and automating everything that you need to bring your stuff to production is really the key for agility and the key for making organizations successful and to keep up the pace with the big five, which we all know are doing a tremendous job in pushing out millions of releases per day. I'm also an AWS Community Builder. The AWS Community Builders program is a program that is open for everyone to apply. You can apply twice per year. The next applications are going to open up in July. And this gives you a lot of possibilities to get in touch with cool people and also grow up your own personal career. I also am a user group leader for an AWS local meetup that we have here in Germany. And yeah, I'm trying to run a YouTube channel, which I'm not actively following every week, as Dan said, right? There's real life besides all of that stuff that we do. And I have 2 kids as well, which takes a big bunch of my time as well. If you want to connect, LinkedIn is over there. Just reach out to me. That's kind of what I use even more than actually using Twitter. But you can reach me on Twitter. So before we kind of get started, let's talk about what I understand what CI/CD is, because this is a very important topic as everyone has different understandings. For me, CI means continuous integration. This means everything that you as a software engineering team do before you actually deploy your application or your piece of software out to the product to a customer's environment. So it's all of the pieces that you need to bring the different bits and pieces of your application, of your software as a service, or of your mobile application together, and then to be successful over there. This is something that the customer will never see, but it is your first guardrail on the way to production, which is why it is important to talk about this. Continuous, CD for me means continuous deployment, and I really made it clear on the slide that this is not continuous delivery, right? So what I really mean with that is anything, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Everything that you commit to your main branch will always be deployed directly. This does not mean that it is directly going into production and being made available to the customers, but it is going to be deployed and it is going to be available in your production environment. And this is what I understand with continuous deployment. The size of your continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline heavily depends on your organization. So it's up to you and on your team and how you're going to build that. Before I move on, any questions so far?
I don't think so, but great point in the CD part, which it's misconfused with continuous delivery. I have seen that many times. So great to point out that part, which is often misconfused with delivery.
And I'm going to try to make that a little bit more visual as well, right? So on the left-hand side, you can see Johannes or you can see Dan working on his PC, doing some stuff, and it doesn't matter if it's an Apple or a Windows machine. You will still have a notepad or maybe an IntelliJ or an Eclipse that you're working on. You're going to deliver your stuff on your local. You're going to test it out maybe locally if you can, and then you're going to commit that to a Git repository. And what then happens after the commit should be an automated process. Everything that comes after the commit should be automated all the way until the right-hand part where we have the production environment. It would start with the continuous integration process. We already talked about that. And it would then follow on to the continuous deployment process. Here, the most important piece to keep in mind is that at the end of the continuous integration process, or maybe even in the middle of the continuous integration process, you're going to have an immutable artifact that is not going to be changed anymore afterwards. This means you build your artifact, your package once, and then you're going to deploy it. And this CD part that we have over here doesn't mean that we have only one environment. This can be a deployment process which goes from a development environment to a higher environment, or even multiple environments. Once again, depending on the organization and on the requirements that you work for. At the end, everything that you do should land on the production environment. This does not mean, as I mentioned, that everything directly goes active. It could also be feature flagged and not be visible to your customers directly from the start. Now I'm going to try to add some more details. And for the next slide, keep in mind that we're talking about a mobile application. So any kind of application that you're building could be iOS, could be Android, could be multi-platform. In my example, it's a Flutter application. Flutter being a tool that you can use to write code once and then automatically create the artifacts for an application that would be hosted on iOS or Android or Windows or Linux, right? So it's a cross-platform application development tool. For this kind of application, you need to have a certain CI/CD pipeline. And in an ideal world, everything that you have here would be automated from the left-hand side until the right-hand side. Once again, picture is kind of the same. It starts with the developer on the left-hand side, goes to the source code repository. Then you would have pre-built, which could include static code analysis, which is SCA here, SAST here, right? So static code analysis. It could also include software composition analysis, which is SCA here. The idea meaning start some security scans already before you actually do the build. Then you would be doing the build, which is where the immutable artifact is being created. You would then go to the dynamic security scan, or maybe potentially other verifications. You would start your test. You would deploy things out to a staging environment. And in case of a mobile application like Flutter, you would need to render that both for the iOS and for the App Store, for the Play Store as well. You would then do maybe a manual approval or maybe an automated approval, which would then lead to deploying this out to production. And then, once again, you would have the monitoring on the artifact that you just deployed. Everything that you have as part of this pipeline should be automated 100%. This slide prepares what we're going to talk about at the end, which is a possible implementation or guideline on how to make this starting point a little bit easier for you, because it talks in this case about having AWS Code Pipeline as a tool to support your pipeline and having the different AWS services that existed at the time of reInvent 2022 to fill the bits and pieces that you need for building out this pipeline. At the end of the session, we're going to see that today we have an easier or simpler solution available on AWS that we can use for that. But before we go to talk about that solution, let's keep in mind what this actually means from an application perspective. Being able to have a pipeline that is 100% automated from the code commit to the production environment requires you to have everything that is part of your application and as part of your software and as part of your software as a service, everything should be written in code. So both the infrastructure that you need to host your application, as also the CI/CD pipeline, as also all of the configuration of the tooling around that, the shipping of your application, and also the monitoring pieces that come at the very end. Everything should be written in code. It should be stored in Git. There should not be a single manual step on your way to production. This is really, really important. And this leads to the question that we're actually going to talk about, or that I wanted to talk about today is, why should software development teams now start with CI/CD? That's really the question. So before kind of moving on, any questions for the introductory part around how we see and what CI/CD is?
What I would like to ask Johannes is, we're going to talk about CI/CD for software development. What do you think about infrastructure management? So we're going to dig into software management, which is they're more used to using a CI/CD pipeline. But what do you think about infrastructure deploying, for example, with Terraform, Ansible, whatever you name here, just to, for example, expand the capacity of something, because your software will depend on that. So
yeah, and this is just one step, right? So it's this deployment step over here. Essentially everything that we see up here should also include your infrastructure as code. So for me, a software today, if we build it cloud native or we build it for the cloud, right? The infrastructure as code that require, this could be Terraform, could be CDK, could be Pulumi, could be Winglang, could be something else. It is part of the deliverable. It is part of the artifact. And with that, it needs to be included as part of the CI/CD pipeline. So the pipelines that I'm talking about includes infrastructure as code deployment, as well as the software packaging, right? So for me, there is no difference anymore, at least in the way that I see it today.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Cool. Thanks for that question. So why do I think that we should start with CI/CD? And I touched on parts of that already. I'm going to start with the first point. So for me, organizations today really want to become faster. This is because the world has become faster. We need to be able to quickly react on changing demands, changing requirements, on changing features. Or maybe we also need to be able to quickly fix problems or defects that are arising. Just over the weekend, a bigger issue with Pixel devices came into the press. I don't know if you've been following that, Dan, but there was a problem with the battery life of Pixel devices, which got reduced from like 9 hours to 2 hours for all Pixel users worldwide. Wow. That is kind of a big thing, right? Maybe not everyone has a Pixel. Most people have an iPhone, right? But still, in this case, this was a defect, right? It was a problem that has been implemented by the Google team, and just today, yesterday evening, they announced, well, it's a problem. It's a backend problem. We're going to fix it. And within a few minutes and hours, they were able to roll that change out globally. And this is what organizations are aiming for, right? Organizations like AWS, like Google, like Facebook, Meta, and like IBM, right? They all try to be faster in order to be able to react faster. The CI/CD pipeline empowers you to actually do that. The CI/CD pipeline gives you the possibility to deliver fast and quick things. Next thing is the quality of the code that you have, for me, is also part of the quality of the product that you're building at the end. And every single line of code counts. So the moment that you start building one single line of code, if you're not ensuring that this has a very high quality standard, you're also directly going to start to build up technical debt. Because of that, I believe that the CI/CD, the CI part especially, like unit test coverage, integration test coverage, is very, very important to have this with the first 5 lines of code that you actually write for your project. Third point for me is that the more that we do in the public, the more software as a service that we build, the more important our reputation becomes as an organization. And reputation, once it is harmed, it is really hard to recover from that. And this means for me that any piece of code that I release to a production environment needs to be security scanned, it needs to be security vetted, and it also needs to be verified whether there is any known vulnerability in it. Because the moment that I lose some data, or the moment that someone breaks into my system or is able to steal some of the stuff that I own for my customers, in that moment I lose reputation, and I will most probably never regain that as a startup. A CI/CD pipeline that you build in the start that has all of that included will protect you from that happening, because you will not be shipping unsecure code. And then, I don't know, Dan, we didn't really talk about that. Do you work as a developer today? Or have you been working as a developer?
I have worked in the past helping developers, not being my developer myself, but, I have experience, just making some commits, pushing to a branch, having that step of, okay, can you accept my pull request? And just seeing the changes, seeing the problem that maybe if they approve my code, would that be okay? So, there are many things to take in consideration when you build a CI/CD pipeline, because yes, you can deploy it in staging and it's fine, but you can basically crash your application even if someone is not attending of what it's approving when you submit a pull request to a branch. So pretty important to have all the code, as you said, high quality standard, following some guidelines, having probably microservices, not always needed, but they're helpful. So yeah.
So what do you think that makes developers happy? So I'm gonna want to hear your thoughts, and then I'm gonna give you my thoughts around it.
I think they want a smooth transition. I want to commit my code. Someone needs to approve it, just to, okay, yeah, you put this function correctly. Okay, this is what we talk about in this sprint, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're going to push it to staging. I want to see some feedback somewhere, monitoring, basically. I want to see, okay, all the monitoring is correct. It was accepted. It was deployed automatically and no manual steps involved, because I was already working in my code. So I think having a smooth transition to an environment, doesn't matter which one, is what developers would like to aim, not having issues when deploying the things or testing.
Yeah. So my thought here brings us into the same direction, but I'm going to start it with a little bit earlier in my career. So when I started as a software engineer working in a professional world, I really I started to cheer, and I was happy when I was able to write code that actually compiled. I was really happy with that. A few, maybe months or years later, that changed, because I was able to write code that compiles fluently, and my IDE was helping me with that. But now someone challenged me with unit tests. So I was happy when I was able to get the unit tests working green. Then, well, a few months later, someone told me, oh, well, we have those integration tests. So then I was happy when I was able to commit code, which did not fail a single integration test. Now, today, when I work on code, I'm happy if the code that I just wrote went to production within minutes. And when I can see the benefits of the code that I wrote coming through the pipeline and coming into the production environments, and in an ideal world, a customer telling me or calling me, yeah, well, you fixed that problem. I'm so happy, right? That's what really makes developers happy. And this is where I believe that a CI/CD pipeline will really enable developers here to feel that joy, right? Of getting direct and consistent feedback very, very fast. And this is why in fast pipeline is also very important. And this then also includes, and with that, I'm going to jump over to that slide that I have prepared, 100% automation on every commit. We already talked about that a bit. I really think that this is important. The moment that you have a single manual step on the way to production, in that moment, it's not a CI/CD pipeline anymore. It's something like a CI and C small d pipeline, right? But it's not a CD pipeline. So now, with all of those prerequisites and all of the thoughts that we spent around CI and CD, I can feel that a lot of people might have something like a fire in their head because it's so much work to do that, right? And this is where I really think that we need to get started early without having any code. We need to already keep in mind, how do we actually want to do our CI/CD strategy going forward, where we need to really think of what are all of the pieces that we're going to need to be successful and happy at the end. For me, this includes first, I already mentioned that it includes the people and the culture and the mindset, because you don't only need to think about, yeah, the code that I commit can be in production in minutes. You also need to have some risk appetite. You need to have confidence in the tests and in the integration tests that you do. But that's all stuff that you need to work out with your team. That's stuff that you need to work out with your organization. Today, I wanted to spend some more time to talk about tools. Tools in this case means that there is millions of CI/CD tools around in the world. You can use GitHub Actions. You can use Jenkins. You can use Harness. You can use Humanic. You can use CodeMagic. You can use GitLab. Did I forget anything big?
Argo CD, Black CD. I know there are too many. Yeah.
Crossplane. I think the list of CI/CD tools on the market is so big that no one can really understand what works, what doesn't work, what you can use. And there's not a lot of best practices that help people to get started. So yes, there might be blog posts on how do I deploy a single page application on GitLab, and how do I make sure that a TypeScript application on GitHub Actions can be actually directly deployed. Yes, there's best practices, there might be guidelines, there might be blog posts. But it's always hard. And this is where, for me, the new tool that has been announced, that you mentioned that earlier already, Dan, has been announced by AWS at the last reInvent, is changing the way that we look at that a little bit, right? Which is also why I've been talking a lot about that. So I don't know if you already have had a look on it. What I'm talking about is Code Catalyst. Code Catalyst being DevTools integrated DevTools service. Same as GitHub, it has a free build minutes and stuff like that. But in general, the way that AWS positions Code Catalyst today is, and this is some slides that I got from someone from AWS that he used at the summit last week in Berlin that I attended. Right, they position Code Catalyst as an alternative to be able to help software teams to deliver faster. This includes accelerating the project setup. We're going to look at that in more details, making sure that teams can collaborate a little bit better, making sure that you can actually update and access development environments. So if you switch PCs, it makes it easier for you to actually access it. And then also having those automated CI/CD workflows, and that all comes built in within the tool. This is where this slide actually kind of tries to make clear that if you remember the second slide that we had on that pipeline where we had code build and code pipeline and all of those different services, Code Catalyst tries to be the umbrella for all of that on AWS. And yes, this might be a niche going forward, but the idea here really is that Code Catalyst as an integrated DevOps service will enable and empower development teams to work in the same pace, in the same direction that AWS is doing that for their own services today. And I'm going to talk about that when we look into the tool itself, because we're talking about CICD. So we're really looking at the automated workflows that we need for our deployment. In this case, Code Catalyst comes with a YAML notation as well, and with a visual editor. And I want to take you there and try something with you, right? And we're just going to pick in the tool one of the existing, they call that blueprints, right? And this blueprint will enable us to quickly do something and hopefully be able to showcase something as well on this call. So with that, I'm going to stop the slide before we go into the tool itself. Dan, any questions, any thoughts?
In Code Catalyst, which I have seen something, but I haven't touched it, so looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's why we're going to touch it now, and you're going to give me some help here, even if you don't know. So we didn't practice for this one. So I'm in Code Catalyst already. As you can see, if you go to create a project, which is where we are already, today we have 3 different options. We can start from scratch, which would be starting with an empty project. Okay, this is cool. I can do that everywhere. I can bring my own code. In this case, I'm currently able to link to a GitHub repository. This is also cool, right?
It is quite powerful, yeah.
I don't like it, to be honest. It's just kind of I don't want that, right? I've told the team multiple times already. I think if we build a service, then we need to have an input mechanism and not a bring my own code, right? An input mechanism would mean now essentially what the blueprint does. The blueprint in this case means the AWS team has prepared some project scenarios, some project setups that we can actually directly access and use within the tool. And that comes with some pieces of code, some software and stuff like that. And where you're going to help me today is then you're going to need to pick one of these. And then we're going to talk about one of these. So at the moment, there's 15 blueprints and 15 different scenarios of what AWS already has. I'm going to exclude one because it takes very long to deploy. I can talk about that in a bit. It's the DevOps deployment pipeline. This one replicates something. Well, this one replicates a best practice implementation by AWS, which we can also add to the show notes later. But this one talks about the deployment pipeline reference architecture, and it is an application pipeline, and it has a reference implementation in Code Catalyst, right? And that's the one. But as you can see, it has multiple stages, but it comes with a loaded opinion from AWS on how we should do that in a best practice world. And it has most of the stuff that I was just talking about already included. So the moment that you hit create over here in this project, we're going to get a bigger architecture, a bigger CI/CD pipeline. And I don't think that we want to do that right now. So please pick something else and then I can talk to it.
I think it's so something related to Node.js, so I think I will go with that. Node.js API with AWS Fargate.
That sounds like a cool one, and that sounds like one that I never tried. So I'm really eager to look at this today with you, to be honest. So I'm not that much Node.js guy, and I try to do serverless and no Fargate if possible. So really Lambda-based, GraphQL, these kind of stuff. So let's have a look on what the description here is. We're not going to bore ourselves with looking too much, right? But as you can see, what we're going to build is an application architecture that is hosted on Fargate. It has different service containers. It has a load balancer and users accessing that. It has a description of the CI/CD pipeline. And well, yes, this is not pretty good yet, right? But this is what I expect from start your project with CI/CD. You at least start with something as good as you can, and then you add your stuff.
Exactly.
We can get some descriptions around the projects that are being used, the setup of the source code repository and stuff like that. And this gives me a good hint to understand on how to get started. And then later on, I can modify on the one side my deployment workflow, but on the other side, I can obviously also modify the different pieces that I have as part of my project. So let's move ahead and let's click on next. And let's call this vBrownBag EMEA. And I've already prepared my setup to include an AWS account and a role that we're going to use to do the deployment and the execution later, which is something that you need to set up once for your Code Catalyst account. Once you have done that, you can check what other additional configuration you have over here. We need to enter something because my account is protected, so I'm not allowed to deploy into US West. I can only deploy into US Central, so I need to switch the region, the deployment region. And what is going to happen if I click on the Create Project button is that in the background, AWS will now start bringing up the source code for me. It will prepare my sources, but it will also already directly start a deployment. And I hope that we are going to be able to see that deployment as well. Before we go there, we get the code over here. So I'm not going to give a full-blown introduction into Code Catalyst. If people are interested, I have some stuff on my YouTube channel that they can have a look on, or just reach out to me afterwards. Most important part here today really is looking at, yes, source code has been created. You can see this as a template. So if you want to do a Node.js service that runs on Fargate, you now have a template. Obviously, you will need to read the code. You will see that there is a hello world, there is an index, you have a Docker file, Docker Compose file, where something will be packaged. You can obviously read the CICD pipeline as well to understand what really happens, but it gives you a starting point. So for someone like me that didn't do much Node yet, right? And I never worked with Copilot yet. I now have something that I can look at. And you all know that looking at something and then modifying it is easier than doing all of the stuff from scratch, right? So that's where the blueprints are really a powerful thing for Code Catalyst in the way that I see it. Now, right?
Yeah,
sorry.
Johannes, sorry for interrupting, but counting that now we saw that there were only 15 blueprints, but I think if I'm correct, re:Invent was like 2 weeks, no, almost a month ago. So I think that, once it's more mature, there will come more and more blueprints with other services and so.
So Code Catalyst started as a preview in December in 2022. That was last year. And it started with 4 blueprints. Now, just 4 weeks ago, Code Catalyst went GA. And with that, we are now up to 15 blueprints. And I really hope that the team is going to deliver more blueprints and actually better blueprints, because the pipelines that we have implemented today are not really good, right? They don't follow all of the best practices that we have been talking about in this call today. Still, it gives you a starting point. So if we now, and I also hope that this will be opened up for me to build blueprints, or for all of us to build blueprints, because then I can have one CICD blueprint that I can share with my organization, and that everyone will need to follow that blueprint, right? And that's where Code Catalyst will play its strength, not now, but in a few months, right? When the team is able to deliver some of the missing functionalities that we have. The workflow over here is pretty easy, kind of, right? It gets the source. You can then execute a build, and you can then do the deploy. I'm not going to look at the details now because it's kind of too boring from a workflow perspective. But what I would like to show is one key aspect that makes it powerful, right? That other competitors do not really have. And you have the possibility to directly switch over from the YAML presentation, and here we can also see what actually happens as part of the steps to the visual presentation, right? But the stuff that is really cool is that if you go to Actions, you are now able to go to GitHub Actions over here, and you can use any existing GitHub Actions. This means it fully integrates with all already available GitHub Actions. So if you have existing workflows, you can directly reuse them, right? And this is where we started the conversation when we jumped into the project. if I have the possibility to link to GitHub, I want the tool to be able to import my existing pipelines already, so I don't need to rebuild them, right?
Yeah.
So yes, it's early days for the tool, but this is really powerful already. And now, without waiting for the details over here, I'm going to jump over to that workflow that we talked about a little bit earlier, that DPRA, Deployment Pipeline Reference Implementation, Reference Architecture workflow. This workflow, I think it is a little bit too much. It doesn't really matter. We're going to look at it anyway. This is how AWS describes deployments and how they try to do deployments or replicate deployments. And I'm going to also link you a very good article around how AWS does that from a CI/CD perspective. But as you can see, this one starts with, once again, workflow source. I'm going to scroll in a little bit. Getting the sources. It runs an SCA scan. It runs a CDK synth. It does a packaging. It then deploys out to a beta environment. In my case, that failed. Once that is completed, it will do an integration test. Once that integration test is completed, it's going to deploy to 2 different regions. Over there, once again, it's going to do deploy and test. Only if those are completed, it's going to do the production deployment. And when using this blueprint, you can configure that. You can say how many roll waves you want to have, how many rollouts you want to do, right? And this is where the blueprints really do what I believe that we should all do, right? They provide you a CI/CD implementation before you actually start writing a single line of code.
Mm-hmm.
And that really buys my point of making sure that we enable developers, right, to have good pipelines, and that we help software teams, software as a service teams, to build something that they can then actually reuse and share with others as well. That's what I had prepared from a topics perspective. I can obviously go detailed into workflows or into best practice or into pipelines, right? But what really enlightened me when using Code Catalyst, and as you can see, I'm using it a lot in different parts of the spaces and different things, is the blueprint that actually brings up a website, right? So it's the single page application blueprint, which is written by AWS as well. And I'm going to jump over again to show you what that actually means, because if you want to build your own website and you want to build your own, as an example, you could build your own blog, right? We have a blueprint over here, right? Then that is called static website, that gives you the possibility to build your blog in Hugo or in Jekyll, right? Which are 2 powerful tools to build your own blog based on Markdown. Mm-hmm. You click that, within 5 minutes, you have your blog deployed. The single page application over here gives you the possibility to choose various different implementation tools, right? So if you're more on the Angular side, more on the React side, more on the Vue side, you can choose for either of those. You click on the create button over there. It's going to bring up the environment for you. You get a CloudFront URL, CloudFront being a content delivery network, which then means that your application is not only hosted in only one region, it's available globally right out of the box. And this is where blueprints are really going to be very, very powerful, right? And my main point here really is that we need more blueprints that follow CI/CD and DevSecOps best practices in order to empower developers. And I'm trying to make sure that we put some more lights on that, right? So it would be really cool to hear the thoughts of the audience, right, on what are the minimal things that they believe that we should be having as part of a CI/CD pipeline. I have my own proposal for that. And once again, I'm going to put a link here. We can once again add that later to YouTube. I have an open source project in GitHub, which is called CICD on AWS example projects. This one actually has a proposal for a generic CI/CD pipeline, right, which would have all of those steps. Now it's up to you and your team at the end to cover different pieces depending on your software stack and stuff like that. In this example project, my aim is to replicate this pipeline in as many CI/CD tools as possible. So I can choose today I want to do GitHub, tomorrow I can do GitLab, and the day after I can do Jenkins, and I can just reuse that and repurpose that pipeline. Yeah. That's the idea of this open source project, where I am inviting people to contribute and to work with me on making this a successful open source project. And with that, if I'm correct, we are kind of ending also the time. So I would then move over to my thank you slide. Which actually I already said everything that I have on it, right? So connect to me on LinkedIn, have a blog that I run. I also have a YouTube channel that I actively work on, and I have this awesome logo that I try to place everywhere, right? So I really hope that you all remember that. And if you have anything that you want to ask me, please feel free, go ahead. You know where to reach me. And that's it from my side.
Okay, I think it was useful. Although, you know, CICD pipelines for me can be quite complex, to be honest. You know, they are quite complex, and, you know, just abstracting that thing, which, I mean, AWS is doing a nice job just to bring more abstraction, although you should know what are you deploying, you know. I'm not able to, okay, I want just a simple application. Maybe I don't need a CloudFront. But yeah, that's up to your team, as you say, and just having the culture say, okay, we have a blueprint. Let's just tune in and let's get to the details. Okay, my unit tests, do I trust them to before just committing my code? And so just having at least the first blueprints, for me, it sounds really well. Great move, I think, for Amazon and AWS. As you said, if you're able later to share your blueprints within your organization, I think that will be quite powerful, because, you know, you're able to reuse it, basically, which is, I think, okay, I have it in GitHub, as you said, for example. I have all my actions, which probably can be like 20 or 30 YAML files per environment. It doesn't matter which one. Okay, I want to use it now in GitLab. Maybe I want to use it in AWS. So yeah, the things that make it quite powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I really think that there's a lot of stuff that we might be getting for the tool itself, right? But that's not what I want the audience to remember. The audience should really remember that one thing: start your project with CICD before you actually write code, before you talk to your product manager about the coolest feature that he wants to get, or your product owner. Make sure that you have a pipeline in place that enables you to securely and safely bring your application code to something like a production environment. This is really my ask to all of you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what I have, for example, in my job, I have customers which deploy legacy applications, you know, .NET, in Windows, nothing else, nothing containerized, and they want to move into the containerized world. I'm like, okay, how are you going to commit your code? Oh yeah, I'm going to put it in some repository and I'm just going to deliver it. And I'm like, okay, you have plenty of stuff to think before just committing the code. So yeah, I'm not even talking about having a pipeline. I'm just talking about, okay, do you have already unit tests? Do you have an environment which is not the production one? And those kind of things, which, yeah, they are important. Okay.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Johannes, for sharing all this information. We will put all the links that you shared. You will share with me. Then we'll put in the video link for within YouTube. Thank you for attending the session. Hope that you have learned something. We'll put all the links that Johannes have shared, and then you can check his project in GitHub, obviously. We will have this YouTube video within this week in our vBrownBag YouTube channel. Thank you for attending. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.